The grand chamber hung in the darkness of space like a jewel made of light and crystal. Inside, hundreds of alien beings filled the seats that curved upward in circles. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others floated in tanks of liquid. A few were just clouds of gas held together by force fields. They all came from different worlds, different stars, different parts of the galaxy. And today, they all agreed on one thing. Humanity had to be stopped. Ambassador Daeung stood in the center of the chamber floor. The ground beneath him was transparent, showing the stars below. He was a man in his 50s with hair that was turning gray at the sides. His dark suit was simple and plain compared to the elaborate outfits and natural decorations of the creatures around him. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking calm. Too calm for someone about to face the judgment of thousands of worlds. The Supreme Chancellor rose from the highest seat. It was an insectoid being, nearly 12 feet tall when it stood on its 4 back legs. Its shell was deep purple and covered in symbols that glowed with pale blue light. When it spoke, its voice came through translators that made it sound like wind through a canyon. "We gather today to address the crimes of the species called humanity," the Chancellor announced. Its voice echoed through the massive chamber. "They have expanded beyond their permitted zone. They have ignored our warnings. They have violated treaties that existed before their species learned to make fire." Dae-Yoon listened without expression. Around him, holographic displays appeared in the air, showing maps of space. Red marks indicated where human ships had been spotted. There were hundreds of them, scattered across regions that the Council had declared forbidden. A representative from the Voth Empire spoke next. It was a being made mostly of tentacles and eyes, floating in a sphere of water. "Humanity grows too fast," it said through its translator. "In just 300 years, they have spread to 1,000 worlds. It took my people 10,000 years to reach 500 worlds. This speed is dangerous. It is unnatural." More voices joined in. A reptilian delegate hissed about human mining operations near sacred sites. A crystalline being chimed about human broadcasts interfering with ancient communication networks. One after another, they presented their complaints. The human species was young, aggressive, and refused to follow the rules that had kept the galaxy in balance for millions of years. Dae-Young waited. He had heard all of this before. Earth had received the warnings and the demands. The Council wanted humanity to stop expanding, to dismantle half of their colonies, to submit to galactic law enforced by Council peacekeepers. Earth had politely declined. The Chancellor spoke again. "The Council has been patient. We have sent diplomats. We have offered guidance. We have given humanity every chance to join the galactic community properly. But they refuse. They ignore us. They act as if they are special, as if the rules do not apply to them." A vote was called. The chamber filled with lights as each species cast their decision. Green for peace. Red for war. The display board lit up like a sunset, almost entirely red. Out of 347 voting species, 345 chose war. Only 2 abstained. None voted for peace. "Then it is decided," the Chancellor declared. "The Galactic Council formally declares a state of war against the species known as humanity. They have 1 planetary rotation to surrender their outer colonies and submit to Council authority. If they refuse, our combined fleets will enforce compliance." The chamber erupted in approval. Roars, clicks, whistles, and sounds that human ears could barely process filled the air. The Council had not declared war on anyone in over 50,000 years. Their military might was legendary. Stories told of entire civilizations that had vanished when they challenged the Council's authority. The assembled fleet outside the chamber included 15,000 warships from 100 different worlds. Humanity's known fleet numbered barely 300 vessels, This should have been the moment when the human ambassador fell to his knees, when he begged for mercy or tried to negotiate for more time, when fear finally showed on his face. Instead, Dae-Yoon laughed out. It was not a nervous laugh or a bitter one. It was genuine amusement, the kind of laugh someone makes when they hear a joke they have been waiting for. The sound cut through the celebrations like a blade. The chamber slowly fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the human standing alone on the chamber floor. The Chancellor leaned forward. "You find your species' destruction amusing, human?" Dae-Yoon composed himself and smiled. "Forgive me, Chancellor. I mean no disrespect. It's just that we've been expecting this." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that made several nearby delegates gasp in confusion. It was paper. Actual pressed plant fiber, printed with ink. The aliens recognized it from their studies of primitive cultures, but seeing it here, in the Grand Chamber, was bizarre. Most species had abandoned physical media millions of years ago. "This is a newspaper," Dae-Young explained, walking toward the Chancellor's platform. "We still print them on Earth, mostly for tradition and for people who enjoy the feel of paper." He placed it on the speaker's podium. "I'd like you to look at the date, please." A junior aide scuttled forward and scanned the paper. Its eyes widened. It showed the data to the Chancellor. "This is dated 3 weeks ago," the Chancellor said slowly. "That's right," Dae-Young confirmed. "Now, if you would, please read the main headline." The Chancellor's translator was silent for a moment before it spoke. "Galactic Council expected to declare war by Thursday. Markets react positively." The chamber erupted again, but this time in confusion and anger. Several delegates shouted that it must be a fake, a trick. Others demanded to know how humanity could have known. Dae-Young raised his hand, and the noise gradually died down. "We've known about this vote for 6 months. We've read your private communications. We've tracked your fleet movements. We know the vote count before you cast it. 345 for war, 2 abstentions. We even know which 2 species abstained and why." He pointed to 2 seats in the upper section. The delegates sitting there looked shocked that he could identify them so easily. "So you see," Dae-Young continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber, "this isn't humanity being caught unprepared. This is humanity waiting for you to make the first move." He smiled again. "I suggest you check your military networks. You might find some interesting developments." The Chancellor gestured urgently to its military advisors. Throughout the chamber, other species were doing the same. Dae-Young stood calmly in the center, hands clasped behind his back again, waiting for them to discover what he already knew. The game, as far as he was concerned, was already over. The Council just didn't know it yet. The Council's chief analyst moved closer to examine the newspaper. It was a Veldrin, a species known for their perfect memory and ability to process information faster than most computers. Its 6 fingers traced over the paper carefully, as if touching something ancient and fragile. Other analysts gathered around, their various sensing organs focused on the human artifact. The newspaper was called The Terran Globe, and it looked like something from Earth's past, though the printing was crisp and clean. The main headline dominated the front page in bold letters. Below it were several smaller articles with photographs of Earth cities, human politicians, and what appeared to be military vessels. "How is this possible?" the Veldrin analyst asked, looking up at Dae-Young. "Our security is absolute. The decision to vote on war was made only 2 months ago in a closed session. Only council members and their direct staff knew." Dae-Young walked slowly around the chamber floor, his footsteps echoing on the transparent surface. "Director Hyan Woo of the Terran Intelligence Division sends his regards. He's been monitoring council communications for the past 7 years. Every message you sent, every private meeting you held, every secret vote you cast. We have recordings of all of it. A delegate from the Kreth Dominion slammed multiple appendages on its seat. Impossible. Our quantum encryption cannot be broken. No species has ever penetrated our networks. That's true, Young agreed. Your networks are quite secure. Unfortunately for you, we didn't need to break your encryption. We recruited your network administrators instead. Turns out, they were quite unhappy with their working conditions and pay. We offered better. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Some were frantically checking their communication devices. Others were calling for security. The Chancellor raised its front legs and brought them down hard, creating a sound like thunder that silenced the room. This is an act of espionage and infiltration, the Chancellor said, its voice colder than before. You admit to subverting our governments, our security, our trust. This only proves that humanity is a threat that must be eliminated. Tae-Yung nodded. I understand your anger, but before you commit to this war, I suggest you read page 3 of that newspaper. The article in the lower left corner. The Veldran analyst flipped the pages carefully. It read aloud. Admiral Myray confirms 7th Fleet ready for Operation Horizon. The Admiral stated that all vessels have completed final preparations and are standing by for deployment. When asked about the operation's objectives, she declined to comment but expressed confidence in her crew's readiness. What is Operation Horizon? The Chancellor demanded. I think your military commanders are discovering that right now. Tae-Yung said. Throughout the chamber, the military representatives of various species were receiving urgent messages. Their expressions, for those species that had expressions, showed growing alarm. A general from the Korthan Federation stood up, his faceplates shifting colors rapidly in distress. Chancellor, we have a situation. Multiple situations. Our flagship is reporting critical system failures. The weapons array is offline and engineering cannot determine why. And we're receiving similar reports from at least 30 other vessels in our fleet. A naval commander from the Vex Collective added her own report. Our supply depot at Kepler 442 is showing massive inventory discrepancies. Equipment that should be there isn't. Ships that were supposed to be completed are missing key components. It's as if someone has been systematically sabotaging our production for months. More reports flooded in. Communication disruptions. Navigation systems malfunctioning. Supply chains breaking down. Ships appearing on sensors where they shouldn't be and disappearing from where they should be. In less than 10 minutes, the Council's mighty war machine was revealing cracks that spread like a web across its entire structure. Tae-Yung waited patiently for the initial panic to subside. He had seen the projections back on Earth. He knew how this would unfold. When the noise died down to urgent whispers, he spoke again. We didn't want war. Earth never wanted conflict with the Council. But we learned from our own history that hoping for peace isn't enough. You have to prepare for war so thoroughly that the other side realizes fighting would cost them everything. He gestured to the newspaper still lying on the podium. That publication has a circulation of about 2 million readers on Earth. It's one of 30 major newspapers we still print. We released this information 3 weeks ago because we wanted our citizens to know what was coming. We wanted them to be ready. More importantly, we wanted you to eventually discover it. The Chancellor's voice was quiet now, almost uncertain. You wanted us to know? This was intentional? Of course, Tae-Yung said. You needed to understand that this war was over before it began. Not because we're stronger than you. Your combined fleets do outnumber ours considerably. But because we've been inside your systems for years. We know everything about you, and you know almost nothing true about us. A small bird-like delegate spoke up, its voice trembling. What do you mean, nothing true? Tae-Yung smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Every assessment you've made of human military capability was based on the ships we let you see, the technology we allowed you to observe, the colonies we permitted you to discover. Tell me, Chancellor, how many human worlds do you think exist? The Chancellor consulted a display. Our records show 173 confirmed human colonies plus Earth. We have 642 colonies, Tae-Yung said simply. The ones you found were the ones we wanted you to find. The rest are hidden across the galaxy, using stealth technology you don't know we have, powered by reactors that don't appear on any scan you can perform. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Our merchant ships that dock at your stations? 1/3 of them are military vessels in disguise, gathering intelligence and mapping your defenses. Your trade networks that you think are secure? We've had operatives in them for decades. Some of them were born into their cover identities. They've never even been to Earth. The Chancellor looked at the newspaper again, as if seeing it for the first time. The markets reacted positively. Your economy is benefiting from this war declaration. Human military contractors saw their stock prices rise, Tae-Yung confirmed. But more than that, our citizens understand what this means. The Council declaring war on us means we're finally being taken seriously. It means we're no longer just the young species that everyone dismisses. It means we've become players in galactic politics. A military strategist from the Hoven clans asked the question that everyone was thinking. If you're so prepared, why not attack first? Why wait for us to declare war? Tae-Yung's expression became serious. Because we're not conquerors. We're survivors. Everything we've done, all of our preparations, all of our infiltration, it was defensive. We needed you to make the choice to attack. We needed you to be the aggressors. That way, when we respond, when we show you what we're truly capable of, the entire galaxy will know that we only fight when we have no other choice. He walked back to the center of the chamber floor and looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. So here's what happens next. You're going to contact every military installation, every fleet, every commander. You're going to discover just how deeply we've penetrated your systems. And then, Chancellor, you're going to make another choice. What choice? The Chancellor asked. Whether to continue a war you cannot win, Tae-Yung said, or to sit down with us and write a treaty between equals. The silence that followed was broken, only by the distant hum of the station systems and the quiet panic of delegates realizing their reality had just fundamentally changed. That 10,000 light years away from the council chamber, Commander Tae-Yang removed his maintenance worker uniform for the last time. He had worn that gray coverall for 8 years, walking the corridors of the council's largest flagship with a toolkit in hand and a smile on his face. Everyone knew him as Tech, the human maintenance worker who fixed things quickly and never complained about the long hours. Nobody knew he was a decorated special operations officer who had volunteered for the longest undercover assignment. In human military history, the flagship was called the Eternal Dominion, and it was the pride of the Council's military. 3 miles long, covered in weapons, and home to 20,000 crew members from a dozen different species. Its shields could withstand the explosion of a small star. Its engines could cross a galaxy in weeks. And right now, none of it was working properly. Tae-Yang stood in his small quarters and activated his real communicator, the one hidden inside what looked like a broken datapad. This is Shadow 7. Authorization code Epsilon 9 Victor. Initiating Phase 2. All over the ship, in quarters just like his, 47 other undercover human operatives received the same signal. They had been waiting years for this moment. Some had arrived on the Dominion as prisoners who were later released and offered jobs. Others had been recruited from human merchant crews that stopped for supplies. A few had been there since the ship was built, working in the shipyards and staying on as crew. Together, they had spent those years mapping every system, every backup, every emergency protocol. They knew where the primary power conduits ran, and which secondary systems could be compromised without triggering alarms. They had been patient, careful, and incredibly thorough. Now it was time to show what they had learned. Tae-young left his quarters and walked toward engineering. He still looked like Tech the maintenance worker, but his movements were different now. More purposeful, more military. He passed other crew members who were rushing toward their stations, responding to the war declaration that had just been transmitted from the council chamber. In engineering, chaos had already begun. Display screens showed red warnings across multiple systems. The chief engineer, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like stone, was shouting orders to its staff. Nobody noticed when Tae-young slipped past them into a maintenance tunnel. Inside the tunnel, he opened a panel that most of the crew didn't know existed. Behind it was a junction node that connected to the ship's main weapon control systems. Over the past 8 years, he and his team had installed 17 small devices at key points throughout the ship. They looked like standard components and passed every inspection. But they weren't standard. They were human-made signal jammers, each one custom designed for specific council systems. Tae-young activated the device. All over the ship, his team was doing the same thing. Within minutes, the Eternal Dominion's weapons went completely offline. The engineering staff would spend days trying to figure out why similar scenes were playing out across the Council's military forces. On a supply depot orbiting Kepler 442, an engineer named Bayara was having a very different conversation than the one she had been having for the past 5 years. She stood in the depot's main control center, surrounded by panicking administrators. But Ora had been hired as a quality control inspector when the depot was built. Her job was to ensure that every ship component met proper standards before being installed. She was good at her job. Very good. Everyone trusted her completely. What they didn't know was that she had been reporting directly to Terran intelligence the entire time. "I don't understand," the depot commander said, looking at his screens in disbelief. "We have records showing that 300 ships were completed last month. But now we're being told that those ships have critical component failures. How is that possible?" Baora adjusted her glasses and pulled up a holographic display. "Commander, I need to show you something. Over the past 5 years, I've been documenting every ship that left this facility." She expanded the display to show thousands of technical specifications. Every single military vessel produced here has what I call a modification in its primary systems. The commander's face changed color as he began to understand. "What kind of modification?" "The kind that lets someone else control key functions remotely," Bayara said calmly. "Weapon systems, navigation, life support. All of it has a backdoor that was built into the components during manufacturing. Your ships work perfectly fine until someone activates the override codes. Then they don't work at all." "You," the commander whispered. "You did this." "I supervised it," Billora corrected. "But I didn't do it alone. Do you want to know how many other human quality control inspectors are working at Council military facilities right now? 67. And every single one of them has been doing exactly what I've been doing." The commander reached for his weapon, but Biora was faster. She had been trained in combat long before she became an engineer. Within seconds, the commander was restrained, and Biora was broadcasting a message to all ships that had been built at the depot. The override codes went out. Thousands of vessels suddenly found themselves unable to fire their weapons. In another part of the galaxy, Captain Jinho stood on the bridge of his merchant vessel, the Wandering Phoenix. He had been running shipping routes through Council space for 12 years, carrying cargo and passengers between worlds. His ship was old and slow, exactly the kind of vessel that nobody paid attention to, except the Wandering Phoenix wasn't actually a merchant ship. It was a heavily modified warship designed to look like civilian craft. And Jin-Ho wasn't just a captain. He was a naval officer commanding a fleet of 300 similar vessels, all of them hiding in plain sight. "All ships, this is Phoenix Actual," Jin-Ho said into his secure communicator. "You are authorized to drop covers and proceed to assign positions. Operation Horizon is now active." Throughout Council space, in busy shipping lanes and near major stations, merchant vessels began to change. Cargo containers that were actually weapon pods opened up. Hulls that looked old and worn revealed themselves to be advanced armor. Engines that had seemed barely functional suddenly showed their true power. The civilian ships that the Council had grown so accustomed to seeing became a military fleet that appeared from nowhere. They moved into position at critical trade routes, near military bases, and around major population centers. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't need to. Their mere presence, appearing simultaneously across hundreds of systems, sent a clear message. Humanity had been here all along, watching, waiting, preparing, back on the Eternal Dominion. Tae-Yang received a message on his secure communicator. It was brief, just 2 words from Earth Command. "Well done." He allowed himself a small smile as alarms continued to blare throughout the ship. Around him, Council crew members were running in panic, trying to understand what had happened to their invincible flagship. They would figure it out eventually. But by then, it wouldn't matter. The war was over before it started, and the Council had lost without a single shot being fired. They had been outmaneuvered by a species they had considered young and naive. They had been infiltrated so completely that their own military was now compromised at every level. Tae-Yang thought about all the humans who had given years of their lives to make this moment possible. The operatives living under false identities. The intelligence officers analyzing endless data. The engineers designing systems that looked normal but did extraordinary things. The patience and dedication it had taken to pull off an operation this massive. Humanity had learned from its violent history. They had learned that the best victories were the ones where nobody had to die, where the enemy realized they had already lost and chose to surrender rather than fight. As the Eternal Dominion drifted helplessly in space, its weapons offline and its crew in shock. Tae-Yang knew that lesson had just been taught to the entire galaxy, and he hoped they would remember it. Admiral Myray stood on the bridge of the carrier Indomitable, watching the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red dots represented Council military assets. Blue dots were human forces. 24 hours ago, the red dots had outnumbered the blue by a ratio of 50 to 1. Now, most of those red dots were flashing with error indicators. She was a small woman with short, black hair and eyes that missed nothing. At 52 years old, she had spent 3 decades in the Terran Navy, rising through the ranks, not because of politics, but because she won every simulation, every war game, every strategic challenge put before her. Other officers called her the Ice Queen because she never showed emotion during battle. But inside, she felt the weight of what was about to happen. Communications. "Open a channel to all Council worlds," she ordered. "All frequencies, all languages. I want every being in Council space to hear this message." The communications officer worked quickly. Within seconds, a confirmation appeared on the display. "Channel open, Admiral. You're broadcasting to approximately 40 trillion beings across the galaxy." Myray took a breath and began to speak. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of someone who had already won and was simply explaining the results. "This is Admiral Myray of the Terran 7th Fleet. 24 hours ago, The Galactic Council declared war on humanity. They believed they were dealing with a young species that had overstepped its bounds. They believed their superior numbers and ancient military traditions would make this conflict brief. She paused, letting her words translate and reach every corner of Council space. They were wrong. Not because we are stronger than the Council, not because we have more ships or better weapons, but because we understood something that they forgot. Information is more powerful than any weapon. Patience is more valuable than any fleet. And knowing your enemy completely means you have already won. The holographic display shifted to show the current status of Council military forces. Ship after ship showed red warnings. Systems offline. Weapons disabled. Navigation compromised. As you can see, the Council's military has experienced catastrophic failures across all systems. This was not an attack. This was the revelation of preparations we made years ago. Every ship built in the last 5 years has backdoors in its systems. Every supply chain has been mapped and compromised. Every communication network has been monitored. My ray pulled up another display, this one showing the positions of human forces. Our merchant vessels that you've grown accustomed to seeing? 1/3 of them are military ships. They've been in position for years, watching and waiting. The colonies you discovered were the ones we wanted you to find. Our real strength has been hidden, deliberately, so that you would underestimate us. She let that sink in before continuing. I want to be very clear about something. We did not want this war. Every step we took was defensive. Every operative we placed was gathering information, not planning attacks. We hoped that by the time the Council decided to move against us, we would have enough leverage to avoid conflict entirely. The display changed again, showing footage from various Council military facilities. Human operatives revealing themselves. Systems going offline. Commanders realizing they had been compromised. But you chose war anyway. So now we must respond. Not with violence. Not with invasion. But with truth. Admiral Myray gestured, and the display filled with data. Intelligence reports on every Council species. Economic analyses showing vulnerabilities. Political assessments revealing corruption and instability. Military secrets that were supposed to be protected by quantum encryption and blood oaths. This is what we know about you, she said simply. Everything. Your military capabilities down to the last ship. Your economic dependencies and which worlds would collapse without which trade routes. Your political structures and who holds real power versus who holds titles. We know which of your leaders are corrupt and which are honest. We know where your citizens are unhappy and where revolution might spark. She let them absorb the magnitude of what she was revealing. Across the galaxy, in government chambers and military headquarters, officials were realizing that their secrets were no longer secret. Their plans were no longer private. Their strength was no longer certain. But here's what else you should know, Myray continued, her voice softer now. The ships you've seen from humanity, the technology you've analyzed, the capabilities you've assessed. All of it was intentionally old. We showed you what we wanted you to see. Our real military technology is decades ahead of what you think we have. She pulled up an image of a human warship. It looked similar to the vessels the Council was familiar with, but the specifications that appeared beside it told a different story. Weapons that operated on principles the Council hadn't discovered. Shields that could adapt to any energy type. Engines that could fold space in ways that made traditional faster-than-light travel look primitive. We didn't share this with you because we were waiting to see what kind of neighbors you would be, whether you would treat us as equals or as threats. You've shown us which you chose. The display changed one more time, showing a map of the galaxy with different territories marked. So here is our offer, and it is the only one you will receive. You will withdraw your declaration of war. You will recognize humanity's sovereignty over our current territories, including the colonies you didn't know about. You will agree to rewrite the galactic treaties as agreements between equals, not between masters and subordinates. Murray's expression hardened. In return, we will share our intelligence network with you. We will help you identify real threats to galactic stability. We will show you the patterns we've seen of dangerous forces moving in the dark spaces between stars, forces that make our disagreement look insignificant. She paused. But if you refuse, if you choose to continue this war, then understand what will happen. We will not invade your worlds. We will not kill your citizens. Instead, we will economically and politically isolate every council member. Your trade routes will close because our merchant ships will blockade them. Your governments will fall because your citizens will learn the truths we've discovered about their leaders. Your military will be useless because every ship will have compromised systems. The display showed simulations of what that would look like. Council economies collapsing, political revolutions spreading, military forces unable to respond. It wasn't a threat. It was a prediction based on data, probability, and deep understanding of how each species would react to specific pressures. This is not about conquest, Myray said, her voice returning to its calm clarity. This is about respect. We want to be part of the galactic community, but only as equals. We will not bow. We will not submit. And we will not let you dictate our future. She signaled, and the display changed one final time, showing a single image. It was the newspaper that Ambassador De Jong had shown in the council chamber. The headline about the war declaration. The article about Operation Horizon. We told our citizens what was coming because we trust them with the truth. We printed it in a physical newspaper because we wanted a record that couldn't be erased or edited. We are not hiding who we are or what we're capable of. Can you say the same? Myray took one final breath before delivering her closing words. You have 48 hours to withdraw your declaration and agree to negotiations. After that, the economic isolation begins. Choose wisely. Choose peace. Because the alternative isn't war. It's watching everything you've built slowly fall apart while we do nothing but wait. She gestured, and the communication ended. The bridge was silent. Her officers looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern. They had just threatened the entire Galactic Council, the most powerful political entity in the known universe. Admiral, her first officer asked quietly, what if they refuse? Myray looked at the holographic display, at the thousands of compromised council ships, and the hundreds of hidden human vessels. She thought about the years of preparation, the sacrifice of operatives who had given up their identities, the careful planning that had led to this moment. Then we follow through, she said simply. Every word I spoke was true. We have the capability. The question is whether they're wise enough to accept peace when it's offered. She turned away from the display and walked toward her ready room. Maintain battle stations. Monitor all council communications. And pray they make the right choice. Behind her, the bridge crew returned to their duties, knowing that the next 48 hours would determine whether humanity's gambit had worked or whether they would have to prove every capability. They had claimed the vote took 37 hours. Not because the council needed time to decide, but because they needed time to verify that everything humanity had claimed was true. They sent engineers to examine their compromised ships. They checked their communication logs and found the evidence of human infiltration. They ran simulations of what would happen if humanity followed through on their promises. Every analysis came back with the same conclusion. Humanity had won without firing a shot. The council chamber looked different when it reconvened. The seats were just as full, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been confidence and anger, now there was caution, and something close to fear. The delegates had seen their military reduced to scrap metal by hidden back doors. They had watched their secrets revealed to the entire galaxy. They had realized that the young species they had dismissed was more dangerous than any enemy they had faced in millions of years. Supreme Chancellor addressed the chamber, its voice lacking the certainty it had carried before. The Galactic Council has reviewed the situation. We have confirmed humanity's claims regarding their infiltration of our systems. We have verified their hidden colonies and military capabilities. We have consulted with our best strategists, and they all agree on one thing. A continued war would be devastating for all Council members. The Chancellor paused, and when it spoke again, the words seemed to physically pain it. Therefore, the Galactic Council withdraws its declaration of war against humanity. We acknowledge that our assessment of the human species was incomplete and flawed. We recognize their sovereignty over all territories they currently occupy, including those previously unknown to us. Ambassador De Jong stood in the same spot he had occupied 3 days ago, but everything felt different now. He bowed slightly to the Chancellor. On behalf of humanity, we accept your withdrawal. We look forward to negotiations as equals. 3 months passed before the new treaty was completed. It was nothing like the original document that the Council had wanted to impose. Instead of rules and restrictions, it outlined cooperation and mutual respect. Human territories were recognized. Human ships would have free passage through Council space. And most importantly, humanity was given a seat on the Council's inner circle. Not as junior members, but as full voting partners. The negotiations were led by Representative Hana from the Terran Diplomatic Corps. She was younger than De Jong, only 35, but she had been preparing for this her entire career. She sat across from Council diplomats who had been negotiating treaties for centuries, and she never gave an inch on the things that mattered. We're not asking for dominance, she explained during one particularly tense session. We're asking for fairness. The old treaties were written by species who had been in space for millions of years, imposed on everyone else who came after. That system worked when everyone was roughly at the same technological level. But humanity represents something new. We developed quickly. We adapted faster, and we refused to be limited by rules we had no part in creating. The Council representatives eventually agreed, though some did so reluctantly. They had no choice, really. The alternative was to watch humanity continue operating in the shadows, gathering information, positioning assets, and growing stronger while they grew weaker. At least this way, with humanity as an open partner, there was a chance to rebuild trust. The signing ceremony was held in the Council chamber. De Jong, now given the title of Counselor, stood alongside the Supreme Chancellor and other Inner Circle members. The old newspaper that had started everything was displayed in a protective case nearby. The headline that had shocked the galaxy was now part of official history. After the ceremony, the former Supreme Chancellor approached De Jong privately. The massive insectoid being looked different somehow. Smaller, less certain. I must ask you something, it said through its translator. Why did you go to such lengths? The infiltration, the years of preparation, the hiding of your true capabilities. Why not simply reveal your strength from the beginning? We might have avoided this entire confrontation. De Jong smiled, the same calm smile he had worn when the war was declared. Because we needed you to make the choice, Chancellor. We needed you to declare war first. If we had simply shown up with our technology and our intelligence network and demanded recognition, you would have seen us as bullies, as conquerors, as a threat that needed to be contained by any means necessary. He gestured to the chamber around them. But this way, you made the first move. You declared war on us. And when we responded by demonstrating what we were capable of, the entire galaxy saw that we had been capable of it all along, and chose peace anyway. We could have attacked you at any time. We could have destabilized your governments or crippled your military. But we didn't. We waited until you forced our hand, and then we showed you exactly why forcing our hand was a mistake. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. So it was all theater. The newspaper, a dramatic revelation, the hidden fleets. You were making a point. We were making several points, Day Young corrected. That we're more capable than we appear. That we value patience and strategy over brute force. That we can be trusted to use our power responsibly. And most importantly, that we don't want submission. We want respect. He looked up at the tall being. Your people have been in space for millions of years, Chancellor. You've seen countless species rise and fall. You've watched civilizations destroy themselves with war or stagnation or arrogance. We're young compared to you, yes. But we learned from our own mistakes before we ever left our solar system. We nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times. Nuclear weapons, environmental collapse, artificial intelligence gone wrong, genetic experimentation, all of it. We survived because we learned to think long term, to plan not just for the next battle, but for the next century. The Chancellor's translator made a sound that might have been a sigh. And now you'll teach us those lessons, whether we want to learn them or not. No, De Jong said firmly. Now we'll work together as partners. You have wisdom we lack. Millions of years of history and experience. We have perspectives you've forgotten. The creativity and adaptability of a young species. Together, we might actually be able to face the real threats in this galaxy. What threats? The Chancellor asked. You mentioned this before, during the negotiations. Forces moving in the dark. What have you seen? Da Young pulled out a data pad and showed the Chancellor a series of reports. Our long-range scouts have detected anomalies near the galactic rim. Energy signatures that don't match any known technology, council, or otherwise. Ships that appear and disappear in ways that violate physics as we understand it. Entire star systems going dark with no explanation. He put away the data pad. We don't know what it is yet. But whatever is out there, it's beyond anything either of us has faced before. That's why we needed this partnership. Because when that threat reveals itself, we'll need to face it together. The Chancellor studied De Young for a long moment. You play a deep game, human. Always thinking several moves ahead. How can we trust that you're not manipulating us again? You can't, De Young admitted. Not completely. But then, we can't completely trust you either. Trust has to be earned over time through actions, not words. The difference now is that we're starting from a place of honesty. You know what we're capable of. We know what you're capable of. Neither of us can pretend the other is weak or ignorant. He extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. So let's agree to this. We'll work together. We'll share information. We'll challenge each other when we think the other is wrong. And we'll face whatever comes next as allies instead of enemies. The Chancellor looked at the offered hand and carefully extended one of its own limbs to clasp it. The gesture was recorded by dozens of cameras and broadcast across the galaxy. The symbolic moment when humanity officially became part of the galactic community. Not as subordinates, but as equals. Later that day, on a world far from the council chamber, a young intelligence officer named Corporal Su Jin sat in a small apartment and filed her routine report. She had been living on this council world for 3 years under a false identity. Her neighbors thought she worked at a local factory. Her friends thought she was a refugee from a human colony that had failed. Nobody knew she was part of the Terran Intelligence Division. Nobody knew she spoke 6 alien languages fluently and could hack into most council computer systems with her eyes closed. Nobody knew that she and thousands of others like her were still out here, still watching, still gathering information. The treaty might have been signed. The war might have been avoided, but humanity's intelligence network wasn't going anywhere. The operatives would remain in place, not to sabotage or attack, but to ensure that peace was maintained through vigilance. Su Jin finished her report and encrypted it using codes that would take the Council's best computers 1,000 years to break. She sent it through channels that appeared to be normal civilian communications. Then she went to bed, because tomorrow she had a shift at the factory and friends to meet for dinner. This was humanity's real strength, she thought as she fell asleep. Not the ships or the weapons or the technology. It was the patience to play the long game, the willingness to sacrifice years of their lives for a greater goal, the understanding that true security came not from walls and weapons, but from knowing everything about everyone around you. The Council had learned that lesson the hard way. They had declared war on a species that was already inside their walls, already in their systems, already several moves ahead. And now they would spend the rest of their existence wondering what else humanity knew, what else they had prepared, what else they were capable of. That uncertainty, Su Jin knew, was the real victory. Not the treaty or the recognition or the seat on the Council. It was the knowledge that humanity would never again be dismissed or underestimated. They had proven themselves without firing a shot, and that proof would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Outside her window, the alien city continued its nightly routine. Ships came and went. Citizens went about their lives. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, forces that neither humanity nor the Council fully understood continued to move with purposes unknown. But whatever came next, humanity would face it as they always had, with patience, preparation, and the absolute certainty that they would never be caught unprepared again. The galaxy had learned to respect them. Now came the harder part, proving that respect was deserved.